of reaching the institutional level that is the concern of human rights. With Locke, he makes a different argument because, unlike Kant, Locke thinks that you cannot be coerced to enter the civil condition. You cannot be coerced by other people to be part of the civil condition, to leave the state of nature and become part of the civil society. For Kant, you can. I mean, you can coerce other people to enter, to leave the state of nature, because if they do not leave the state of nature, they are still ready to wrong you and to. I mean, it's a little bit complicated, but if you do not leave the state of nature, even if everybody has the natural right to external freedom, there are no impartial way of adjudicating claims about freedom made against one another. So there is no third party, that is the state, the judge, that in the case of a controversy is about, have you overstepped the limits of my freedom? And he said, no, I didn't. But no, you did. And so there is no third way, impartial way in which this contrast about, spheres of freedom, the extension of my freedom compared to yours, can be adjudicated. So your natural rights are always provisional, Kant says. They are never, it's not conclusive, I forgot the term, but they are not secured, let's put it this way. So that's why there is the possibility of coercing other people to enter the civil state. For Locke, according to John Simmons' reconstruction, there is no such right of individuals to coerce other individuals to enter in the civil society. But still, Simmons says, also, if we start from Locke, there is an equally good way of reaching the institutional level that we need to be faithful to human rights. Now, the way he does that is by arguing that in the modern world, most of us have been subjected without our consent, because he's a Lockean more than a Kant. Simmons is a Lockean. So he says, we have been subjected without our consent to political, legal, and economic institutions that deeply affect our life prospects. Institutions that are extremely wide-reaching and straightforwardly coercive. Being subjected at birth to the basic structures of our societies is not a way of our choosing anything. So we are born into the state. It's not at one point they ask us, do you want to enter the state? No. So if that is the case, continues Simmons, in my view, this is itself a violation of our natural rights, a wrong that, if it will not be fully repaired, as seems extremely likely, so we will never go back to the state of nature even if we want, must at least be minimized. And the obvious path to minimizing that wrong in a society that inevitably will not fully correct that wrong by its very existence is to subject people only to institutions that treat them as fairly as is possible, in the context of a coercively imposed and maintained system. So Lockean natural rights theory can in fact defend the very same kind of natural rights to a fully just institutional structures that flows more directly, as we have seen, from Kantian natural rights theory. So here the point is the following: the state is always a violation of your rights, according to Locke and according to Simmons. The best you can do is to repair the wrong, to minimize the wrong, to minimize the effect of the wrong. What is the best way of minimizing the inevitably wrong that comes with the fact that you were born in an institutional structure that you have not chosen? Is to live in just institutions, at least, right? So, if there is a way of saying that Locke prescribes the existence of just institutions, starting from his natural theory, natural rights theory, then we have an indirect, not as direct as with Kant, but an indirect way of reaching the institutional level that we were looking for, because the institutional level is essential for human rights. So, Bites, you are right that human rights are about ensuring an institutional setting for individuals that does not wrong them to the point in which they no longer have a dignified life. I concede that. Fine, this is what human rights do. But I can show you that unlike what you think, even if you start from the natural rights theory of Locke, that seems to be the farthest away possibly from the institutional concern, because he conceived of the institutions always as a wrong. I have a way to show that as a way of minimizing the wrong that institutions bring with themselves, Locke has a way of saying that we should build just institutions so that the wrong is minimized. And therefore, we reach the same institutional concern that we were looking for, which in turn shows that it is not true, like Bites think, that the non-institutional nature of natural rights make them incompatible as the foundation of the institutionally laden human rights that we think, that we know. So, I agree with Simons. I don't know what you think. I don't agree so much with his idea that institutions are always wrong. I'm not as Lockean as he is. That institutions are, even if they are just, they are nonetheless a wrong done to you, basically, because you have not chosen them. It seems that he has in mind something like the following: at one point, to be fully fair to people, they should be really given the opportunity to choose the anarchical option or the institutional option. If they are not given this option, already a wrong is done to them. Kant doesn't think this way. Kant thinks that anarchy is always wrong. It's not a question of choice. It's always wrong. Because you put the natural rights of people in danger by living in an anarchical society. Locke, according to Simons' reconstruction, thinks otherwise. You cannot be coerced to enter the civil society. It has to be your choice. And since it is never our choice, institutions are always wrong. But even if that is the case, you want to minimize the wrong, and the only way in which you can minimize the wrong is to live in a society in which your natural rights are secured. It is not true, like Bites thinks, that starting from a naturalistic conception, you will never be able to be faithful to the institutional dimensions that is so prominent in human rights. And similar things could be said about the timelessness nature of human rights. It is true that we talk about a timeless right to freedom of expression that each individual has, whereas today in the human rights list we find freedom of the press, more concrete things, but there is a rather straightforward way of, starting from the timeless and natural right to expression of your thoughts freely and without, fear of consequences, to the various declination that you may find according to the technology that your society puts at your disposal to make this into a more concrete, historically determined right. So now, natural rights may be timeless. Human rights could be bound to the institutions and to the technology and to the specificities of your society, but that doesn't mean that one cannot be the foundation of the other. So, yeah, that's a very, very good answer to this mainstream political philosophy that not only, like with rules, things we do not need, it's possible that there is, but we do not need a moral foundation of human rights. But to this stronger position that says, it's not just that we don't need it, it's that it is not doing any good, it's actually harming in the case of human rights, trying to put them in connection with a higher moral foundation. So what do you think? I mean, do you have clarificatory question? Was I unclear on some of the passages? Or if you want to comment, whether you are convinced by Simmons, by Bites, where is your heart before your reason?
I'm thinking Leo Strauss. I think for him, I don't know.
Leo Strauss, you said?
Natural rights is not timeless for him, I think.
Oh, that's interesting.
Historical.
Why? Why? Tell me more.
I think maybe for him, human rights is the same thing that natural rights.
Okay. So they are both
Denomination, justice.
nonsense upon stilts, as Bentham famously said. No. Well, I mean, I don't know Leo Strauss' theory of human rights, if he ever said anything about human rights, but I suspect, knowing a little bit of him, that he's kind of skeptical about human rights, like many other philosophers have been in the history of philosophy. Famously, the first one was Jeremy Bentham, who said, oh, this talk about natural rights, in fact, he wasn't talking about human rights, natural rights are nonsense upon stilts. You know, stilts are, when people have this kind of stairs. Here is the guy, right? So he maneuvers these stilts and to make him higher. I don't know, trampoli in Italian, I have no, stilts in English, I have no idea in Portuguese. So, so human rights are nonsense upon stilts. Why upon stilts? Because there is a big rhetoric about them. So they come as if they were grand things, but they are still nonsense.
But I think he valorized.
You think? What?
Strauss valorized natural rights.
Okay.
He has a good point with this subject, but I'm not sure he differentiates from legal right, but in my point of view, he thinks human rights as the same thing that human rights.
He thinks natural rights as the same thing as human rights. And since he valorizes, as you say, since he likes natural rights, he also likes human
and
rights.
And they are not timeless.
Well, I'm afraid I don't know enough about Leo Strauss to answer that question, but thank you for pointing that out. And I would expect him to be a little bit more skeptical, but that's just a conjecture. It's not that I know. Other questions? Comments?
I would like to touch the point of inalienable.
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 Okay.
Thank you. Tomorrow or?
No, tomorrow I think I'm going to impose on you my own view, specific view. On,
Okay. And
but
this-
if you want to talk about inalienability now,
yeah,
I'm
because
happy
it's,
to do
it's
it.
just a point that I was immersing liberal debates
Yeah.
against libertarians, for instance.
Right.
And do you think an account of human rights, for example, could support, give a reason why basic rights or human rights, anything are inalienable?
So are you asking whether I think that if you emphasize human rights as inalienable, you are making a libertarian point?
No, if you emphasize dignity, for instance, as a foundation, you
Yes.
will have a stronger reason why human rights or in another context, basic liberties should be inalienable.
Ah,
So a defense of a liberal point of view against libertarians, which think that they should not be inalienable.
okay, I see. I don't know, I have to think about it. Well, I would say that if you take seriously the idea that human rights express human dignity, then there are certain things that are inalienable, yes. No matter what you do, you cannot be given a degrading punishment. I mean, it's an open question whether that penalty is degrading. I think it is, but I think it's wrong. I don't think it's degrading. But it's certainly the case that certain things resist any possibility of being lost. So in this sense, I agree with that suggestion. Yeah, but I think to think a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, just curiosity.
No, it's a good point.
Because of this Kantian roots.
Because you think the libertarians think that certain rights are more alienable than liberal things.
Yeah.
Like
besides-
what?
Basically, all the basic liberties the liberals point out for libertarians are alienable. You can.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, no such
Because-
things that you can lose your right to vote. For
Yes,
example, your civic rights.
Yeah, because it's yours. They are derived from what they call self-ownership. So it's just like
They can be sold in a sense.
Exactly.
They can be given
Exactly.
away. In this sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then I guess I agree with you. Yeah. If you start from human dignity, probably there are things that you cannot do even to yourself.
Exactly.
Mm.
That's the liberal point of view.
Mm.
Rawls and other.
I don't know how liberal that is. That sounds more Kantian than liberal.
Exactly, but
Well,
because
it's,
of the Kantian
it's a
roots
debatable
of
point
this-
whether Kant is a
of
liberal
this-
thinker, but well, okay, yeah, but in general I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Professor,
Yes.
you show that there is no inconsistency between just saying that our human rights are derived from natural rights.
Yes.
So there's a logical contradiction in showing this.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow, are you going to make the point of a case for the existence
Of human dignity.
human dignity or something
Yes.
like this? Because I think it's something very different to say that there's no inconsistency
Oh,
between
yeah.
something and to show that
That-
this may exist in
absolutely.
reality and people have natural rights and things like this.
Yes.
So,
I'll try to do that, and I don't know if I was fair enough to Simmons, but I do think that he doesn't say much about the validity of natural rights. He makes this huge hypothetical argument that says if natural rights are grounded, then there are no principled reasons not to use natural rights as the major premise to derive human rights. But of course, the if is still there, right? So, no. yeah, I'll try to say something. I mean, I'm still working on it, so do not expect a fully fledged account of, you know, human dignity and why we have them, but why we have it. But yeah, that's pretty much what.
Not that I don't agree with this, because I'm inclined to believe that there's a foundation for human rights and the moral itself.
Mhm.
But I really think it's very difficult to make a case for the existence of that.
Yeah.
Some kind of objective foundation
Mm.
for something like this. It's the most difficult thing to do.
We like only difficult challenges, otherwise, yeah, we get bored.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.